The academic session 6, titled Comparison as Relations. As chairs in these sessions, we have two seasoned academicians and expert administrators. Professor Gulfishan Habib. I invite Professor Gulfishan Habib onto the stage. And Professor Ishtiaq Ahmad is also there. He will join shortly. We have 5 presenters today, supposed to be 5 presenters. The first presenter, Dr. Adar Dedni from University of Cambridge, has intimated his inconvenience. So we'll start with the first presenter, Dr. Rizwan, who is supposed to be presenting online. The third presenter will be Professor Saeed A. Saeed from IFLU. The fourth presenter will be Professor Jyoti Sabarwal from University of Delhi. And the last presenter is Dr. Qadri Saida Arshia Farooq Hussain, CCA SC Aurangabad. So I invite all the panelists to come on to the dais. So we'll start with the online presenter, Dr. Rizwan Ahmad from Qatar University. His topic is Chapati Karaka, the language contact between India and Arabian Gulf. I request the IMC team to connect him. Rizwan, sir. Sir, can you hear? Hello, sir. Rizwan Ahmad, sir.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I'm not able to. Can you hear me, guys? Can you hear me?
Yes, you are audible, sir. You can start.
I can't hear you. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right. Good. All right. So I'm going to present. Share a screen. Share a screen. All right. Can you see my presentation, please?
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Sorry, there was a little bit of confusion because I thought I wasn't online. Anyway, I wanted to thank you all for inviting me to present. My name is Professor Rizwan Ahmad. I'm a professor of linguistics in the Department of English Literature and Linguistics in the College of Arts and Sciences in Qatar University. I will be presenting on a very interesting phenomenon of loan words from Indian languages and mostly from Urdu and Hindi into the Gulf spoken Arabic in Qatar and the region as a whole. My presentation is titled Chapati and Karak, Urdu Hindi loan words in Gulf Arabic dialect. So as an introduction, I think most people are familiar that the cultural and linguistic exchanges between South Asia, broadly, and the modern Gulf states, consisting of the six oil rich countries, is centuries old. Although in the last 45, 50 years, the intensity of migration and contact has become quite strong. So with the oil boom in 1960s, there is a large migration of labor force of both blue collar and white collar people from the Indian subcontinent to the GCC countries. A large number of the migrant workers, both blue and white expats, are Hindi and Urdu speakers from the subcontinent. Now, while there are studies of Arabic loanwords in Indian languages, not just Arabic loanwords, but also Persian loanwords, there is paucity of research on the reverse phenomenon, which is how Urdu loanwords have gone into the spoken Arabic dialects. Now, so I'm my presentation is going to be very short. I'm making two specific, or maybe three specific points. So I through the presentation I'll be showing how the borrowing of Urdu Hindi words such as chapati, karak, pankha, chulha, darisha, salona into Gulf Arabic shows substratum influence of Urdu and Hindi on spoken Arabic dialects. The reason why I'm calling substratum because it is a language that is associated with not the dominant, politically or socially dominant people, but much less prestigious and dominant language. Uh, the second point that I'm going to make is that how some of these words have actually become, some of these borrowed words from Indian languages have become icons of local Gulf identity. So, meaning that the words that were borrowed from lower stratas, from working class people in the Gulf region, have become now markers of national life and cultural identities in the Gulf. And then I towards the end I just offer a comparative perspective on the indexical meanings of Urdu words in the Gulf and also in India. Now, language contact is a very interesting phenomenon because when two languages come in contact, a lot of very interesting linguistic outcomes have been found. So, um, um, Sarah Thomason, who, by the way, was also my supervisor at the University of Michigan, where I did my PhD, she has done quite a lot of work on contact and borrowing by herself and with her co-author Kaufman. In both of these work, the authors argue that the outcomes of language contact depends on the intensity of the contact. So, on the one hand, you could see it as a continuum. You will see that there is a minimum or very casual contact. On the other extreme is a very intense contact. So the linguistic outcomes of these contacts on these extreme ends uh, and in between will depend on how the two or more than two groups of speakers are interacting with each other. For example, if the contact is casual, borrowing of content words such as nouns, verbs, adjectives, etc., is an outcome. If the contact is on the other side, on the other extreme of the continuum, which means that it's really intense, people have lived together for a long time, they speak each other's languages, then even the grammatical elements such as conjunction, pronouns, even inflections can be borrowed. Thomason and Kaufman give a continuum of the things that can be borrowed. So if the contact is minimum, it's casual, then non-basic lexical items are borrowed. But if the contact is really intense and meaningful and sustained for a long time, then inflectional morphology can also be borrowed. The convergence, for example, there was a study in 1971 by Gumpers and Wilson who showed that in the Kupwar village, because of the sustained contact, some of the grammatical elements, grammatical structures were also borrowed from one language into another. Now, types of borrowing, depending on what the source of borrowing is, scholars have differentiated. between substratum influence, its influence that is coming from a socially subordinate languages that are not prestigious in that setting, onto a dominant or more prestigious language. There are many examples of that. For example, in if you look at the English word tomato, it is an example of a substratum influence because it came from one of the American Indian languages into English. English was the dominant language, and American Indian languages were the much less dominant. In the Indian context, there are examples of, for example, early on, like the retroflex sound itself in Indian languages is the influence of a substratum influence, most likely from Dravidian languages. Superstratum influences are those influences that come from a powerful language, from a prestigious language, to a less prestigious and less powerful language. For example, during the Norman conquest, French influence on English would count as a superstratum. In the case of subcontinent, we can see the influence of Persian on Indian languages, not just Urdu and Hindi, but Gujarati, Marathi, and other languages as superstratum influence, because the influence is coming from more dominant and powerful language to less dominant and powerful language. Another type of stratum is if the languages from which words are borrowed into the other language are of the same prestige and power, then the influence is called ad stratum. In my presentation, I will not be talking about ad stratum influences. Now, I wanted to give a little bit of sociolinguistic background of Qatar and the GCC in general. What you are seeing right now on the graph is the percentage of nationals versus non-nationals in the 6 GCC countries. You will see that in most of the countries except Saudi Arabia and Oman, actually non-nationals, expats, people from South Asia and Southeast Asia, including the Philippines, are actually more than the nationals. So, for example, in Bahrain, 47% people are nationals and 53% people are expats. In the country where I work currently in Qatar, 88% of the people are non-nationals, meaning that they are not from Qatar, they are not Qatari national. Qatari nationals constitute only 12%. If you look at the GCC as a whole, then what we find is that 48% of the people in the GCC are local nationals, Arabic-speaking local nationals, and 52% of the people are from different countries, some of whom are Arabic speakers, but a large number of them are from the Indian subcontinent or from Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. Now, Nepal constitutes one of the highest groups of people in Qatar, at least. So this is important to understand the contact between Indian languages and languages and Arabic primarily. Now, the graph on the right hand side shows that in the workforce, the percentage of non-nationals goes even higher. So, for example, if you look at Qatar, 95% of the workforce in this country consists of people who are not Qataris. Similarly, in the UAE, not the UAE, Oman, for example, 77% of them are non-nationals, and so on and so forth. So the purpose of these two graphs is to show the possibility or opportunities for contact between different Indian languages or other languages as well, and Arabic. All right. I already went over this. So the overall the GCC countries show a massive presence of non-nationals, of which Indians or the South Asians constitute the bulk. All right. All right. Now, borrowing into the GCC dialects. Now, standard language ideologies surrounding Arabic, the standard Arabic, which is in Arabic is referred to as Fusha, is quite strong, and therefore it works as a bulwark against borrowing from Indian languages, which means that if you look at the standard Arabic in the GCC, you do not find many loan words from Indian languages because um, standard Arabic doesn't really like borrowing from other languages. However, the locally spoken dialects are much more receptive to borrowing from Indian languages because they have had probably the most sustained and meaningful contact with Indian languages than any other languages. Now, Urdu and Hindi words, because of this, are found in day-to-day semantic domains. I just want to give quick examples of food and culinary. For example, chapati, karak, saluna, biryani, roti. These are some common words that are used by Arabic speakers in their dialects all the time. Some other domains: chulha, pankha, kachra, kacha, kurta, drisha, which is daricha from Persian. These are also words that are used in a day-to-day basis. So here is some example of what roti. I lived in Yemen. By the way, those of who you do not know, I am a fluent speaker of Arabic. I lived in Yemen, so I'm very, very familiar with the culture and the language of the region. In Yemen, that bread that you see on the slide is called roti. They have Arabic names for other forms of bread, but this one is particularly called roti. Of course, which is the Urdu and Hindi version of this. It's the same name that that is pronounced slightly differently. At the bottom, what you see is salan, basically. Now, in the Gulf, the word has slightly changed to saluna, and it's also pronounced with an emphatic sad, so it becomes saluna. So roti is from Sanskrit origin. Salan is also of Sanskrit origin. Both of these words are very common in the day-to-day spoken dialects of the Gulf. Chula. I mean, of course. I mean, if you have salona, you have to cook on chula. Chula is such a common word. You would think that it won't be borrowed. Here is a. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to play. It's a video. All right. So what you see here, this is an ad for an app. It is called Khadum. It's a service that if you go somewhere and you need some help, you can you can ask for the help on app. And what she's saying is that if you went out by the sea and you see that your chula is running out of gas, you can use the app. So the word that she used is chula, which is a word of in Sanskrit origin, widely used in the Gulf. Uh, Now, what is interesting is that the Gulf dialect has the sound ch. So, standard Arabic doesn't. So, it makes the integration of the word into Gulf much more easier. Now, let's come to the chapati and karak. Now, chapati and karak is a national dish. It's really, it's not just a drink and food, but it has become a marker of cultural identity of the Gulf in general and Qatar in particular. Uh, Everywhere you go, you will find this. In fact, now chapati and karak has become so popular that they have opened a branch in England with the same name and the same menu and everything. Now, chapati is a type of bread, as we all know, in India. In GCC, however, chapati is a word that's used to refer to what we in India call paratha. So you can see it. It's often eaten for breakfast, but it's available for the rest of the day. Even in the evening, you can go and get it. And they have actually improvised it a lot. So you could have it wrapped with whatever you want: cheese, honey, labna, and so on and so forth. All right. Now, karak, the same thing. It's a word of Sanskrit origin, which literally means intense and strong, which has become the name attached with the chai. Now, in India, we say karak chai. Here, they don't have to say chai. Karak means a chai or tea that's boiled with milk and tea for some time. Now, there are lots of places where you can find karak in the Gulf in general. There is an article, very interesting article, about how the word has actually been appropriated by the Emiratis in the UAE as a symbol of their cultural identity. Although the word, as we all know, and I just showed that the word comes from Hindi, going back all the way to Sanskrit and other later forms of the language. So Mousavi's, he talks about the cultural appropriation of karak in the UAE, but we are not talking about that, so we will have to move um, uh, to the next word that I want to talk about, kurta. Now, I do a lot of videos in Arabic on language related issues. I made once a video which was very popular. It's about the word kurta. Now, kurta is a word of Persian origin, widely used in Indian languages, especially in Urdu and Hindi. In the Gulf, GCC, in the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula, it is used more limited sense, referring to the dress worn by women only. All right, so so there has been a semantic borrowing of. I want to conclude uh, is that from the word has now become a symbol of cultural identity. You can see it here in the university. They had a program in which they said karak ma'al amid, karak with the dean. So you can see that it's no longer just a word, but it has become a symbol of the cultural identity because it is used in the men's majlis. So it shows camaraderie and informal setting, and so on and so forth. All right, so final thoughts that karak and chapati are words of Urdu and Hindi origin, and through substratum influence, they have become part of the Gulf Arabic dialects, despite being associated with people of lower social prestige and class. They have also become markers of Gulf life and culture. In fact, one can argue that karak has become a cultural icon. Now, it is interesting to note how a borrowed word from Urdu and Hindi becomes integrated into the Gulf spoken Arabic and rises to the status of the cultural symbol of the country and the culture itself, and and has become an indexical marker of the identity. I just want to end with I don't live in India as much, but I follow things there. What I found interesting is that in India itself, where Urdu was born, Urdu words are treated very differently. So what it shows us that the social and political processes go into the formation of how words have come to mean what they mean in our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for Rizwan Ahmad sir for exposing the language contact. Uh, yeah, chair is requesting one or two questions to be taken for this online presentations because he might be signing off.
Sure.
Very quick, very short responses. Professor Panchanan.
Thank you,
Please switch
Muhammad, for your presentation.
my contact.
Thank you for your presentation. Since you say that roti is from Sanskrit, can you tell the source? Whenever you say that it's Sanskrit, you must tell the source. And I believe very strongly roti cannot be from Sanskrit. The same is
Okay.
true of karak. So that is the comment that I would like to make, nothing else.
All right. Oh, okay. I think the my point about the context is not that it is from Sanskrit. I mean, I will check the source. However, my point was that Indian languages have provided a lot of lexicon for to the Gulf spoken Arabic. So even if it's not from, but it is definitely of Indian origin. So that is the point. But thank you for pointing out. If it's maybe it is not from Sanskrit, it's from a later stages. I'm not sure, but my point is still valid about the substratum influence in Gulf spoken Arabic.
डॉक्टर रिजवान अहमद साहब, आपने अच्छा मकाला पेश किया है। आपसे एक सवाल ये है कि आपने कहा अरबी बोली, अरबी मेयारी ज़बान में जो वर्ड्स आए हैं, चपाती वगैरह मुख्तलिफ जो इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं, क्या इस अमल से ज़बान की प्योरिटी मजरू हो जाएगी और ज़बान का जो हुस्न है वो भी जो क्या है बाकी नहीं रहेगा? तो इस सिलसिले में आपका क्या ख्याल है?
देखिए, जबान का जो प्योरिटी का कॉन्सेप्ट है वो एक फिक्शन है। मतलब कोई जबान ऐसी नहीं है जो प्योर है। मैं अरबी बोलता हूँ। स्टैंडर्ड अरबिक में अगर आप देखेंगे, कुरानिक अरबिक में फारसी के अल्फाज हैं, ग्रीक ओरिजिन के अल्फाज हैं। हमारी जो उर्दू है उसमें तो जाहिर है मुख्तलिफ ज़बानों के अल्फाज हैं। अब तमिल में आप देखेंगे तो संस्कृत के अल्फाज मिल जाएंगे। संस्कृत में जो लोकल इन्फ्लुएंसेस हैं वो भी मिल जाएंगे। तो ये जो हुस्न का जो तस्वुर है, ये ज़रा सा मसला इसमें बहुत है लिंग्विस्टिक्स के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से। जो हुस्न है, मतलब आज जो हुस्न उर्दू का है, अगर आप देखते हैं तो वो संस्कृत और अपभ्रंश और उसके बाद की जो शक्लें हैं वो बिगड़ी हुई शक्ल एक तरह से थी जो खूबसूरती पैदा करती है उर्दू ज़बान में। अब पीठ जो हमारा ये जो लफ्ज़ हम इस्तेमाल करते हैं पुष्ट के लिए, वो संस्कृत में पृष्ठ, वही बदल करके ये हो गया। तो मेरे ख्याल से वो जो नोशन है बहुत ही प्योरिटी का, वो ज़बान की हकीकत जो है उससे बिल्कुल अलग है। हर ज़बान, हर जिंदा ज़बान जब दो दूसरी ज़बान से मिलती है तो वो एक दूसरे से लेती है और देती भी है। तो ये नामुमकिन है कि उर्दू या जो अरबी ज़बान है वो दूसरी ज़बानों से अल्फाज ना ले। मतलब एक तो बहुत पुरानी डिबेट है, पुरानी बहस है अरबी में कि कुरान में भी जो ऐसे कुछ अल्फाज हैं जो फारसी से लिए गए थे और इस्लाम के आने से बहुत पहले ये अल्फाज अरबी ज़बान का हिस्सा बन चुके थे। तो जाहिर है वो अरबी हो चुके थे। उसमें जो अल्फाज अगर आप चाहें तो इस्तबरक है, सिरात है, और इस तरह के दूसरे अल्फाज हैं जो फारसी से आए हैं अरबी ज़बान में।
Thank you so much, sir. Rizwan Ahmad, sir. Now, speaking on translating empathy, the function of comparative literature, Professor Saeed A. Saeed.
Friends, this is the okay. Friends, I must confess that what I have to say is quite tangential to the important themes of this seminar. To my abiding shame, I must confess that I do not know any of the three languages, Urdu, Arabic, or Farsi. And even otherwise, what little I wanted to say is already there in the abstract. In addition to that, all I have is some, frankly, platitudinous nonsense. So I will not take too much time so that the other people after me who have something significant to say will get more time to engage the audience. And I'm not going to say anything scholarly also. So the senior scholars among you can doze off. I would like the students to pay attention to what I want to say. The only thing that I want to talk about is something that is blindingly obvious, that throughout history, in particular today, if we try to identify the one source of human strife, depredation, suffering, misery, it is identity. More accurately, the reification of identity, the glorification of identity. That, look at all the strife. It is based on either ethnic identity, religious identity, sometimes ludicrously even linguistic identity, gender identity, national identity. We have become, I think, like frogs in the boiling water. We got so used to it that it doesn't seems to strike us that this is something that needs to be addressed. If we want anything like fundamental decency among human beings, we need to eradicate this primal sickness, because it is primal. We call it the tribal instinct, or call it what you like. This sense of I am this, and this is the other. And because it is the other, obviously it must be my enemy, my opponent, my adversary. So the logic of identity and otherness, we know that it's practically everywhere. And all the wars, I do not know if I am permitted to use the G word. All these are because of identity. So now let me say what I mean by glorification of identity. This is starting from patriotic, nationalistic pride to a religious sense of, self-aggrandizement, that I belong to this, I am this, I belong to this group, I belong to this persuasion. The second, more insidious thing is what I call the reification of identity, which is that we essentialize certain attributes, certain qualities, certain beliefs, certain kinds of behavior as constituting my essence. I pray to a particular God by a particular name in a particular fashion. I have a certain sexual orientation. I have a certain food preference. I happen to speak a particular language, and so on. But these are things I do, things I believe. These are part of my behavior, my characteristics. They are not me. The existentialist philosopher, as you all know, Sartre, pointed out that existence precedes essence, and what he meant essentially is that we make this mistake of essentializing, that is, cramming into the essence of the person the things which are contingent, incidental. Like many words that we use when you say somebody is a miser, it seems to imply as if there is something inscribed in the essence of the person. He is a miser. But there is no such thing. It is as Sartre points out, there is a series of occasions when, for whatever reasons, that person behaves in a miserly way. He can change. And this extends to example of gender. A woman may have a certain anatomy, physiology, even some emotional, a temperament that is different from that of the males. But that there is no such thing as a female or feminine essence that without that you cannot conceive of it. It will become even more clear in the case of racism. Racism is a matter of reification of identity. There is a black person, let's say an Afro-American. Yeah, he has a different complexion, a different kind of facial, bodily structure. He may have even a different worldview, a different culture. But it is as if his being black has been concentrated into his essence. He is black. Now, this shift from he belongs to a particular country, that he has certain features, he has certain characteristics, certain habits. They could be good, bad, or the other. That's the same in matters of, the LGBTQ and so on. Some of these things, it's unpopular to say them in this way. I say, look, if there is a man, if he is, for whatever reason, he prefers to have sex with another man than a woman, well, it's his private business. Like, you want to have sex with another man instead of a woman or a unicorn. How does it matter? To make the person into a description, oh, he's gay or queer or something else or transsexual. The problem is not with the tolerance, with the acceptance of the practices. The mischief lies in essentializing, reifying, so that you make it part of that person's identity. When you ask a person, who are you? He or she will give you 100 answers, except the simple right one, saying, I'm a human being, I'm a member of the human race, for better or worse, that's what I am. All the rest is contingent, incidental. It doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be, it is not a part of what I am. Now, the second point, I'll be faster now. The other thing is, forgive me, I mean this very sincerely. You can say that when you're retired, you can say all this nonsense. I'm sick and tired of these academic journals, publications, conferences, and so on. At the end of the day, we speak learned things, sometimes in a convoluted, jargon-ridden way, pat each other on the back, go home. And then what? The world remains what it is. It's as if we have forgotten over a period of time what education is all about. Most of us here are teachers, are students, aspiring teachers. Take it from me, you have become redundant. The classroom, the one sacred space on which you had some kind of a take-up, was taken away by the internet quite some time back. Before you even began saying, if I'm teaching philosophy, I start by saying, okay, I'm going to talk to you about Aristotle's categories, the student can Google quickly and can get a better version from some professor from Harvard on that topic. There is no need for him to sit and listen to my second-rate nonsense when he can get a better version of it. And now AI has come. And the danger with AI is that it doesn't just provide you knowledge, it tempts you to outsource your thinking. That is the most dangerous thing about AI. It says, don't think, आप सोचने की ज़हमत न करें. You leave it to me. You tell me, what is the problem? What is the issue? Now, here comes our gross failure, our short-sightedness, forgive me, but our sheer stupidity when it comes to education, that we have forgotten what education is all about. At best, our saving grace is that there is employability. We want to make the young people employable, which essentially means preparing slave material for capitalism. Yes, people need livelihood, but in the humanities, there are no employable skills you can teach. For at least more than 2,000 years, knowledge, the concept of knowledge has hijacked all epistemology, and the humanities have been victims of it. There is no pursuit of knowledge. There is no knowledge that you can give to the student in the humanities. Literature में आप क्या knowledge देंगे? Philosophy में आप क्या knowledge देंगे? It's not knowledge at all. The object of the humanities is understanding. When you read a work of a poetry, a novel, what you try to get is understanding of the human condition, about another person, about a deviant personality. It's not knowledge. And connected to it is the capacity to think. It doesn't have to be first-rate thinking. You have to think on your own, just as you have to wipe your own ass, blow your own nose. We have to emphasize, and we are not doing that. Heaven knows what we think is happening around us. So I believe that first and foremost, we have to ask ourselves, what is the classroom for? What is the role of the teacher? What kind of world makers do we want the next generation to be? And one of the most important things we need to help them understand, motivate them to act upon, is that we are fundamentally, when you go down to the rock bottom, humans, in the same way, sharing the same miserable human conditions. We are united by the commonality of our suffering, our nightmares, our aspirations, and our despair. So we have to emphasize this and help young people in some way of some, let's say, positive contagion. Try to create a world in which you don't care a damn about whether the other person, what language he speaks, what God he worships, what food he eats, that these are incidental, they are completely immaterial. I don't know the meaning of the term literature. Professors of literature refuse to tell me. It seems to be some trade secret. I take 6 novels to a professor of literature. They look at it and say, yeah, this is literature. This is not literature. This is literature. मैं पूछता हूँ कि भाई how what are the criteria? नहीं, वो हम नहीं बता सकते. वो कुछ एक 6th sense है. कि लिटरेरी टेक्स्ट और नॉन लिटरेरी टेक्स्ट में वो फर्क करते हमको सिखाएंगे नहीं कि कोई नई किताब है तो कैसे बताएंगे ये लिटरेचर है कि नहीं है. एनीवे, और कंपेयर टू लिटरेचर तो और मिस्टीरियस चीज है जो हमको समझ में नहीं आती. बट द पॉइंट इज दैट एनी ह्यूमन utterance, if it is deep enough, sensitive enough, comes from the center of one's being, it resonates with all humanity. Therefore, it is important that we translate the utterances from other languages, other cultures, other times, other parts of the world, so that we can see that common subterranean thread that connects us all, makes us, rooted in one source. Only that kind of understanding can help us learn to push aside, marginalize the disease of identity and all the scourges that follow from it. I'm extremely sorry that I have taken so much time to just say this trite, cliched stuff. Thank you so much for patiently listening to me.
Thank you so much, sir. Moving on. The next speaker, Professor Jyoti Sabharwal from University of Delhi.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jyoti Sabharwal from, and I'm celebrating here at your institution the first anniversary of my retirement from the Delhi University, Department of Germanic and Romance Studies. And I'm a bit of a, as they say, parrot on the North Pole in this august gathering of Persian scholars, Urdu scholars, and Arabic scholars. I am going to present a text to you today, which is by the Shakespeare of the German language, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's text inspired by the Persian writer Hafiz. And as the previous speaker very aptly said, that in this period of toxic identity politics at all levels, it comes like a breath of very, very beautiful fragrance that Goethe's text epitomizes the other, celebration of the other, learning from the other, and in crossing not just the boundaries of the German nation, but the boundaries of Europe, and finding answers in the East. So I read I was told I have 20 minutes. Is it less now?
I think you can manage with 20.
Yeah, I prepared my paper, a 20-minute paper, but I can make it shorter. I'll try to make it shorter than that. So the title of my paper reads, World Literature, Translation, and Cultural Symbiosis, Reading Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's West-Östlicher Divan. I'm using the German because that is how it is, the West-Eastern Divan in English. In 1819, the 70-year-old Johann Wolfgang von Goethe published the West-Östlicher Divan, West-Eastern Divan, with the Kota publishers. This volume of poetry is divided into 12 books, followed by notes and comments for the German reader. He anticipated that it would be a text that his German readers will not be able to comprehend. So the 13th part is a commentary and notes on the problems he faced while writing this text and what the reader should take into account. These extensive notes to facilitate the reader's comprehension of the text and problematize the process of translation too. The given titles of the books reflect literary and linguistic symbiosis and are a result of Goethe's literary and spiritual journey through the Quran and Persian literature. I will just show you slide number 1 and slide number, sorry. Yeah, this is, if you look at the screen, you'll see that this is the original 1819 text, first publication, and you see the Persian on one side, and you see the German. It is old, the old Gothic German script on the other side. Yeah, and this is how it appears. The Persian name of the 12 books and the German name of the 12 books. And for the facility of all of you, today I have done, this is my translation. I'm sorry, can you help me with this? No, the previous slide. No, the one after this.
It's not moving.
This, just leave it here. This, if you see, these are the first is Mugani Name, Buch des Sängers, Book of the Singer, Hafiz Name, Buch des Hafiz, Book of Hafiz, Ishq Nama, Buch der Liebe, Book of Love, Tafkir Nama, Buch der Betrachtungen, Book of Observations, Ranjish Nama, Buch des Unmuts, Book of Discontent, Hikmat Nama, Buch der Sprüche, Book of Maxims, Timur Nama, Buch des Timur, Book of Timur, Sulekha Nama, Buch Sulekha, Book of Sulekha, Saki Nama, Das Schenkenbuch, Book of the Wine Cup Bearer, Matal Nama, Buch der Parabeln, Book of Parables, Parsi Nama, Buch des Parsen, Book of Parsis, and Chuld Nama, Buch des Paradieses, the Book of Paradise, and the 13 are Noten und Abhandlungen, notes and treatises. This is a freehand translation done by me from German into English. The Western Divan is the most voluminous of all of Goethe's work of poetry from the time he started as a writer of the Storm and Stress period. The young Goethe was from the Storm and Stress period, and the later Goethe becomes the representative of German classicism. Thematically, this text is as relevant as ever, in sharp contrast to Rudyard Kipling's East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet, or the more recent concept of Clash of Civilizations by Samuel P. Huntington. Goethe in his Divan writes of the equality and interdependence of the cultures of the East and the West. Orient und Occident, this I'm quoting from the text, Orient und Occident sind nicht mehr zu trennen. In English, it says, the Orient and Occident can no longer be separated from each other. In tune with the focus of our conference, my paper will draw on the intersections of Goethe's concept of world literature, translation, intertextuality, and cultural symbiosis through a close reading of the Westöstliche Divan, the West Eastern Divan. I have divided the paper into two sections. The first section of the paper deals with Goethe's concept of world literature and the role of translation in the creation of intercultural texts, while the latter part centers on the intertextual components within the body of the West Eastern Divan and its cultural resonance. Part 1, as mentioned at the outset, the West Eastern Divan is a late work, yet the most voluminous amongst Goethe's poetic compositions. It coincides with Goethe's engagement on formation of his concept of world literature, which, unlike the contemporary, was not preoccupied with the world literature canon. I'm referring here to David Damrosch and his work on world literature. He emphasized dialogue between cultures across national boundaries through literature. National literature, in German Nationalliteratur, was to be replaced by a universal, all-encompassing world literature, Weltliteratur in German. This world literature was neither to restrict itself to European languages nor to contemporary texts. It was to bring literatures of the East and from the ancient times into its ambit so that diverse cultures and languages could enrich each other. Remarkably, Goethe was developing a concept of world literature which was anti-colonial in spirit at a time when European colonialism was at its peak. However, Goethe did not formulate a unified theory of the concept of world literature, nor is it laid down in the form of a separate text. His ideas of world literature were in tune with the spirit of harmony and universal humanism of the German classical period in literature, and were articulated in his correspondence with his friends, in conversations, and in his autobiography Aus meinem Leben, Dichtung und Wahrheit, Part 1 and Part 2, his treatise on literature, Schriften zur Literatur, Writings on Literature, Part 1 and Part 2, and his journal, Propylaen. Cosmopolitanism was an essential aspect of Goethe's concept of world literature, and he envisaged and required active engagement by all and not just the highbrows. Now, this is a highly democratic concept of world literature which Goethe is propounding, that it is not just for the learned and highbrow, it has to percolate down to the common man. The necessary exchanges and ideas required mutual visits and meetings of writers, and therefore travel gained importance in inculcating a cosmopolitan spirit in the world literature project. However, translation of text was of utmost importance for fostering not just intercultural understanding, but to give an impetus to the creation of new texts. Goethe himself was an avid translator and had propounded the theory of translation. In his opinion, every literature must pass through 3 phases of translation. As the phases are recurrent, all may be found taking place within the same language system at the same time. The first acquaints us with the foreign countries on our own terms, and Goethe cites Luther's German Bible as an example of this tendency. The second mode is that of appropriation through substitution and reproduction, where the translator absorbs the sense of a foreign work, but reproduces it in his own terms, and here Goethe cites Wieland and the French tradition of translating. The third mode, which he considers the highest, is one which aims to perfect identity between the source language text and the target language text. And this mode creates a new manner which fuses uniqueness of the original with the new form and structure. Goethe cites the work of Voss, who translated Homer, as an example of a translator who had achieved his prized 3rd level. Goethe is arguing here for both a new concept of originality in translation, together with a vision of universal structures that the translator should strive to meet. In the 18th century, the expansion of European colonialism in Africa and Asia, translation of literature of these regions was facilitated. Although from the perspective of post-colonial criticism, it is believed, Spivak also refers to this, translation of indigenous texts of European languages was necessitated by the colonial governance apparatus. Nevertheless, when these translated texts became accessible to the European reader, many cultural encounters and dialogues were made possible through the process of translation, which in Goethe's conception was necessary for the development of world literature. In fact, the West-Östliche Divan and Goethe's own engagement with Persian culture and Islam is to be seen as an impact of the German translation of Khwaja Shamsuddin Muhammad, pardon my bad pronunciation of Persian, Muhammad Hafiz Shiraz's Divan from Persian to by the Orientalist and the diplomat Joseph Hammer Purgstall. He was a diplomat and Orientalist who had translated it, and Goethe read the translation. Goethe read the translation in 1814, and thereafter he immersed himself in creating his poetic magnus opus. The Zeitgeist, it is in Goethe's research, it's referred to that the Zeitgeist too played a role in looking eastwards beyond the borders and boundaries of Europe, because the Napoleonic Wars and the resultant political instability and social unrest led to Goethe's disenchantment, and he immersed himself in literatures of the East and propagated his concept of world literature, enabling the formation of cross-cultural aesthetics and sensibility. Here I would like to mention that he read Georg Forster's translation of Kalidasa's Abhigyan Shakuntalam too, which impacted his poems. Amongst them is his poem Shakuntala and his world-famous play Faust I. The prologue is impacted by Abhigyan Shakuntalam. Now I come to section 2. For 5 years, Goethe worked on his Westöstlicher Divan, which comprises of a collection of poetry divided into 12 books written under the influence of the 14th century Persian poet Hafiz, with whom he felt a spiritual bond, and whose themes and form of writing, especially the ghazal, he incorporated with his own. Goethe referred to Hafiz as his twin and felt a deep bond with him. A poem in the West Eastern Divan states, "And Hafiz, though the whole world go under, with you alone will I strive to compete. Let pleasure and pain be held in common for us, twins that we are." End of quote. He admired the unique quality of Hafiz's ghazals, which seamlessly oscillate between verses of worldly love and mystical love. Hafiz is regarded by him as the grandmaster of this ambiguity, able to move with highest formal command between poetry and prophecy. Similarly, Goethe believed his inspiration came from the same spiritual origin or archetype that produced Hafiz's poetry. Here, I would like to emphasize that the spiritual, in the case of Goethe, is not to be equated with religious. He was rather indifferent to religion. But spiritual bonds, yes. This connection led him to assert a belief in a shared human experience and the concept of his world literature. A testimony to the spirit of mutual respect and appreciation is a monument in Weimar. I hope I get it right. It's the third slide. This one. Yes. If you look at this, this was erected in the year 2000 in Weimar, which is the city of Goethe and Schiller, where Goethe worked. He was a absolute genius. He was an administrator. He was a scientist. He was a writer, poet. And here, if you look at these stone chairs, they are kept at an equal level. The West is not looking down or talking down to the East. Hafiz's and Goethe are at an equal level. Another important aspect of authorship and inspiration of Goethe's Divan is raised by the internationally renowned Goethe scholar, Professor Katharina Mommsen. She opines that Katharina von Wilmer, a Frankfurt banker's wife and Goethe's lifelong friend, she worked both as a muse and co-author on the Divan, a secret which was well kept till she died. This is now a question of authorship that she too contributed, but it was not brought out while she was alive. She is supposed to have composed several poems, especially the Book of Zuleika, and the figure of Zuleika is inspired by her. The central motive of the poems is love in its several manifestations. First, there is benign charity extended to man as man. Secondly, there is the charming relation of the old sage poet and topper of wine to the boy bearer, eager for wisdom, and last, there is the passionate love of man and woman exhibited in the pair of Hatem and Zuleika. The language of the Divan is rich in metaphors which blend Oriental imagery, for instance, the images of the vast desert, the camel caravans, and sarais, with Western poetry traditions to generate a unique poetic tenor. Besides the motive of love, the other dominant motives interwoven into the poetry are spirituality, Sufi mysticism, which refers to Rumi and other Islamic traditions for which Goethe had a fascination. Then there is the motive of nature and travel imagery, which evokes a yearning for the Orient, as is depicted in the following couplets. Next slide, please. Slide 4. Next. Yeah, this. Yes, this is it. Now, these are these motives, and I have just taken out some examples. I have translated 2 couplets from the Hikmatnama as examples. Now here you see the respect he gives to and the yearning he shows for the Orient. Herrlich ist der Orient übers Mittelmeer gedrungen, nur wer Hafiz liebt und kennt, weiß, was Calderon gesungen. Beautiful is the Orient, spread far over the Mediterranean Sea. Only the one who loves and knows Hafiz knows what Calderon wrote. Calderon is this Shakespeare of the Spanish language, the greatest of European dramatists. So he says that you have to know Hafiz in order to know Calderon. Then the second here is the Ginkgo biloba, which is reference to nature, the tree, Bilboa tree. Dieses Baumblatt, der von Osten meinem Garten anvertraut, gibt geheimen Sinn zu kosten, wie's den Wissenden erbaut. The leaf from the tree of the east, entrusted in my garden, carries a secret meant for the wise. Here, the translation ends. Now, I will just conclude, paucity of time. Further existentialist observations and ruminations about life, time, destiny, and poetry itself are recurrent in the poetry. The 13th poetry is notes and treatises. Finally, I would like to contextualize Goethe's Divan with reference to Walter Benjamin's concept of the original text, that is the source text's relationship to the text translated in the target language, as propounded in his seminal text, The Task of the Translator, which was integral to the formation of contemporary translation theory and will elucidate the impact translation has on world literature. According to Benjamin, by means of translation, a relationship between languages is established, and the translated text attains a life of its own in that particular language. In this case, the translation of Hafiz's Divan into German by Joseph von Hammer-Purgstall was instrumental in the creation of Goethe's West Eastern Divan and continues to live on in the German language. Although within the literary corpus of Goethe, it is Faust. I must confess that this is a lesser read of his, although the most voluminous, but lesser read of his works. It is Faust and Apigeny von Taurus, which are the most read in German-speaking Europe and beyond its boundaries. Yet, according to David Damrosch, he refers to Goethe when he writes his whole book on world literature. The West Eastern Divan is not merely a literary masterpiece, but is a practical demonstration of Goethe's concept of world literature in action, a dynamic, relational, and translation project that bridges diverse cultural worlds. Thank you very much for your patient listening.
Thank you, Jyoti ma'am. The final talk of the session, Comparative Literature in Multilingual Context by Dr. Kadri Saida Arshia.
share my
PPT. This one. This one.
Oh, yes.
No.
No. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Respected chairperson, distinguished scholars, and fellow participants. At the very outset, I would like to thank the organizers for accepting my paper to be presented in this international conference and allowing me this opportunity to hear to the scholars of the literature. At the very outset also, I would also like to confess that I also unaware of the script of the three languages, that is Urdu, Arabic, and Persian. But still, I tried. And it's a pleasure and an honor to present my paper titled Comparative Literature in Multilingual Context. As we all know that.
We have 10 minutes time.
Okay. As we all know that comparative literature has long been defined as the study of literature beyond the boundaries of a single nation, language, or culture. Reinwellich's classic formulation placed emphasis on, I quote, the comparison of one literature with another, unquote, while also foregrounding connections with philosophy, history, and the arts. Yet, the field has continuously evolved, shaped by global shift in knowledge production, linguistic diversity, and the demands of cultural plurality. In the 21st century, when globalization, migration, and digital communication constantly unsettle linguistic boundaries, the role of multilingualism becomes increasingly vital in comparative literature. Multilingual contexts pose both opportunities and challenges. They broaden access to literary tradition while simultaneously complicating the act of comparison through issues of translation, untranslatability, and power hierarchies between languages. The discipline must grapple with whether its methods reproduce monolingual dominance or whether it can accommodate a genuinely pluralistic engagement with world literatures. This paper argues that comparative literature, when situated in a multilingual framework, becomes more than an academic field. It functions as a space of negotiation between cultures, identities, and epistemologies. Drawing on Goethe's idea of wealthy literature, even Zohar's polysystem theory, and reshapes and post-colonial frameworks, this study examines how multilingual comparative practices reshapes our understanding of literature, literary circulation, translation, and cultural power. The paper is divided into the few of the sections, that is historical trajectories, multilingual methods, and there are some case studies. I would like to present before you the Pising references about the theoretical insights. Theoretical insights by Goethe, as just previous speaker said here, famous idea of wealthy literature or world literature first imagined a global literary conversation beyond national borders. However, that vision was still largely Eurocentric. Later, Itamar Ibn Zohar's polysystem theory offered a more inclusive model, viewing literature as a network of formulating
This is the slide.
yes, Yes, this one. Even Zohar's polysystem theory offered a more inclusive model, viewing literature as a network of interacting centers and peripheries. And post-colonial thinkers Nanyugi, Boathiang, and Homi Bhabha pushed this further, showing how language itself becomes a site of resistance, hybridity, and identity. Let me illustrate this multilingual dialogue through the relationship between Persian and Urdu literature. For centuries, Persian served as a literary bridge across Central and South Asia, shaping the evolution of Urdu poetics. Rumi, the 13th century mystic poet, begins his Masnavi with the verse, Bishnav az nae chhaun, hikayat mikonot, az joda ya shikayat mikonot. I'm sorry if I misspell or mispronounce. Listen to the reed as it tells its tale. Complaining of some separations from cause it pains, that cause it pain. This spiritual longing for union inspired Urdu poets like Mir Taqi Mir, who transformed mystical separation into emotional and human love. Hafiz of Shiraz wrote, Agar anturk a Shirazi, bedast arad dil mara. If that Shirazi Turk would take my heart in hand, I would give away Samarkand and Bukhara. Centuries later, Ghalib reinterpreted this sensuous ambiguity into existential reflection in his famous line, Hazaro khwahishe aisi ki har khwahish pe dam nikle. Thus, the Persian lyric tradition lived on in Urdu, reshaped through emotion, intellect, and hybridity. And then Saadi of Shiraz, who timeless verse, Bani Adam Azaye Ek Paikaran. Human beings are members of one body. Finds a modern echo in Faiz Ahmad Faiz's revolutionary call. Bol ke lab azad hai tere. Speak, for your lips are free. Across centuries and languages, this dialogue between Persian ethics and Urdu humanism shows how multilingualism nurtures continuity and renewal. There are some global parallels as well. We find similar multilingual negotiations elsewhere. In Tagore's bilingual works in India, Akibi's creative use of English in Africa, Mahfouz's Arabic novels that reach global readers through translation. These writers remind us that world literature is not a single, universal canon. It is a network of voices constantly translating, adopting, and conversing. So I would like to conclude. That comparative literature in a multilingual context is both a challenge and an opportunity. It challenges scholars to move beyond monolingual and Eurocentric frameworks, while offering the opportunity to engage deeply with the plurality of human expression. Through theoretical frameworks such as Goethe's Weltliteratur, even Zohar's polysystem theory, and post-colonial approaches, we see how multilingual comparative practices enriches literary studies by highlighting translation, hybridity, and cultural negotiations. The case study explored in this paper, from Tagore's translation and Rushdie's hybrid idioms in India to Akibi's appropriation of English and Newgi's reclamation of indigenous languages in Africa, to Mahfouz's Arabic novels, Persian classical poetry, and the Urdu ghazal tradition, collectively demonstrates that literature is never bound by a single language. Instead, it emerges from a constant process of borrowing, translation, and reinvention. Arabic's role in shaping trans-regional tales like the Thousand and One Nights, Persian's long-standing position as a cosmopolitan literary language, and Urdu's hybridity as a product of Persian, Arabic, and Indian vernaculars all exemplify the inherent multilingualism of global literary tradition. In light of these examples, multilingualism in comparative literature is not simply an academic tool, it is an ethical imperative. It compels scholars to recognize marginalized voices, destabilize hierarchies, and foreground the polyphony of literary tradition. In an era marked by globalization, migration, and digital connectivity, comparative literature must resist the temptation of homogenized diverse literatures into a single world literature canon. Instead, it must cultivate a polycentric model that values linguistic diversity, cultural specificity, and multiple forms of literary belongings. Future research must also attend to the role of technology in shaping multilingual comparative practices. Digital humanities, machine translation, and online archives are expanding access to text across languages. But they also raise questions of fidelity, cultural nuisance, and epistemic justice. The task of comparative literature will be to balance these technological possibilities with a critical sensitivity to the complexity of language and culture. Ultimately, comparative literature is a multilingual context, reimagines the discipline as a space of cultural negotiation, intellectual inclusivity, and ethical responsibility. By embracing multilingualism not as a complication, but as a resource, the field can move toward a richer and more equitable engagement with the global literary tradition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. We are left with only 6 minutes before the scheduled time. So we'll have a discussion, and I invite Chair Professor Gulfishan ma'am for leading the discussion and making her remarks.
The kind permission of Chair, I would like to address my question to presenter number 2, second presenter. She has referred Goethe, and while referring Goethe, she said that though his bond, I'm very sorry that I'm not able to recall the sentence, his attachment with religion was limited, but he was having a strong bond with the spirituality. So my submission is, in the broader term, religion encompasses all aspects. In spirituality. Means you told that his bond with religion was limited, but his bond with spirituality was very strong. That was the point, I think. So my small submission is, as far as the broader meaning of religion is concerned, any religion is not limited to the rituals, but it encompasses all the aspects of life, including spirituality, physical development, moral development, etc., etc. So what do you like to say? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this is one of those eternal concepts and questions, which has no really clear answer. But I have extensively worked on his autobiographies, and see, he was for this kind of a spiritual bonding, which can stem from religion, but it can also be present without being a practicing, let us say, XYZ, going through the rituals. So he himself was not very, I use the word indifferent. It was not that he rejected completely, but it was not of great importance to him. But for him, the main thing was this spiritual creation of a certain kind of a human spiritual bondage with one another, a bond between human beings, which is part and parcel of, I think, all classical projects in literature. All classical literature emphasizes this universal human bondage, and he was very much in spirit in tune with that. maybe not too much into the ritualistic aspect of Christianity.
The better word will be ritualistic.
Ritualistic, yes, yes.
No questions, but a comment to just an observation, Said. I must admit, with all honesty and with all appreciation, that you were honest enough in pronouncing a confession of tendentiality. Appreciate that, and that gave us space for you to say everything. The other observation that is there is that yes, when you're talking about existence precedes essentialism, it does, but also essentialism has been inflicted now with banality. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to it? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Sir, my name is Shah Khalid. I am a BEd student here. When we see the woman is referred to multiple words in these languages, Urdu, Hindi, Arabic, and Farsi. In Hindi, Devi, we call women the Devi, Imra, Malika, or Tahira, Rohaniya. Sir, my question is to first representer. Sir, just you mentioned the LGBTQ in your address. What is culturally acceptance, this term in these languages? Thank you.
I don't know the languages. I confess that I do not know these languages. Of course, I'm a polyglot. In college, I learned how to say you are very beautiful in several languages. At that time, I had international ambitions. But otherwise, the only phrase I know in Persian is Khuda Hafiz. I'm very familiar with it because people say it within 5 minutes of meeting me. And as for Arabic, some people say I should say Allah Hafiz, but not Khuda Hafiz. But I do not know whether right or not, because I do not know whether Allah is a name or a word, whether it's a common noun or a proper noun. If it's a common noun, it's a word and should be translatable. But a name is not part of a language. Names are outside language. They're empty signifiers with only a referent and no signified. So I don't know if Allah is supposed to be a common noun. And if it's a name, I can have as many names to God as I wish. I can have my own pet name to God. Like my pet name of God is Golmal. So Golmal. So, Golmal. So, I already said that, and Urdu, I speak a broken kind of Urdu, but unfortunately, I do not know how to read or write Urdu. But I'm sure somebody else will be able to tell you what these letters.
Ms. Samina, there is one more question there.
There's one more here by Dr. Munir and then Taqi Abidi.
शमसुर रहमान साहब फारूकी साहब से एक शख्स ने कहा मैं अल्लाह हाफिज कह रहा हूं और आप मुझे खुदा हाफिज का जवाब दे रहे हैं. इट्स रिकॉर्डेड. शमसुर रहमान फारूकी साहब ने कहा मैं उर्दू का अदीब हूं और उर्दू के मुहावरों की हिफाजत मेरा काम है. अगर मैं अल्लाह हाफिज कहना शुरू करूं, खुदा हाफिज ना कहूं, तो फिर अल्लाह निगहबान. वो सवाल ये था कि अल्लाह इज ए अरबिक वर्ड और आपके हाफिज आपके जो है अल्लाह हाफिज दो अरबिक वर्ड का जो है तरकीब हो जाए तो सलमान ये खुदा हाफिज में खुदा पर्शियन वर्ड है तो इसके साथ तो शमसुर रहमान फारूकी ने कहा फिर मैं अल्लाह निगहबान का क्या करूं अल्लाह बड़ा है क्या करूं अल्लाह रखे क्या रखूं करके पूरा तीस से बताया कि हम अपने जो है जो मुहावरे हैं तहजीबी जो मुहावरे हैं उसकी हिफाजत करते हैं तो अगर कोई मुझसे कहा तो अभी मैं जो है नमाज जुमा ही पढ़ूंगा मैं समझता हूं मेरे ग्रैंड चिल्ड्रन जो है सलातुल जुमा पढ़ेंगे तो स्टिल आई एम कंटिन्यूइंग माय आपके तहजीबी लुक तो ये जवाब जो है हमारे शमसुर रहमान फारूकी का था
Thank you, sir. I would like to take the question from Dr. Munir.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Once I was talking to Najma Haftulla Sahiba, कॉन्फ्रेंस के बाद मुझे उनको कहीं बुलाना था उनसे बात हो रही थी जब मैंने आखिर में उनसे कहा कि अल्लाह हाफिज नहीं she was after me she said why you are saying you are the copying Pakistanis what do you mean खुदा उर्दू और पर्शियन में खुदा है तो अल्लाह तो एक ही है whether you are calling खुदा और अल्लाह तो वो तो अल्लाह ही है हमने we used to say मुझे नहीं मालूम पाकिस्तानी क्या कहते हैं और बांग्लादेशी क्या कहते हैं हम इंडियन हैं तो हम तो अल्लाह हाफिज ही कहते हैं और अल्लाह लफ्ज है जो यूनिवर्सल भी है और अल्लाह के लिए सिंगल आया है वैसे 99 नेम्स के अलावा अल्लाह ही सब लोग ज्यादातर कहते हैं अल्लाह का करम अल्लाह हाफिज तो ये फियामान अल्लाह तो ये खुदा हाफिज तो ये बहस का मुद्दा नहीं था लेकिन वो उन्होंने तकरीबन मेरा हाफ एन आवर लिया इसको गुफ्तगू मैंने कहा अच्छा आप माफ करिए ये बहस का मुद्दा नहीं है मैं अल्लाह हाफिज ही कहूंगी उसके बाद मैंने रख दिया
Thank you.
Scholar there wanted to ask a question to Dr. Rizwan. Do you still have a question? In the first session, a lot of you wanted a question.
I have a comment. When you said that, professors of literature do not tell you what literature is, that's a, when you asked what is, literature, there are lots of discussion between literature and non-literature. And probably we'll discuss that while, eating lunch. And if a text has literariness, it is literature. If a text doesn't have literariness, it is non-literature. And then please don't ask me to define literature, literariness now. We'll discuss that during lunch.
All right, I'll be very happy to finally know the secret of how to look at a novel and say whether it is literature or not.
Now I invite Professor Gulfishan, ma'am, for making her remarks.
To all the members of the human race in this auditorium and the smart devices that are used not just to capture the images and videos of the two-day international conference, a memories in the making event, but also to take selfies. The first part of my sentence, as you would have already guessed, is inspired by Professor Saeed's talk as the second speaker today. Each conference is always a learning and also an unlearning process. To our scholars and students in the hall, I'm sure there were some expectations which might have been addressed, and there might be several other questions that you might be leaving the hall with towards the lunch hall. But as Professor Mohanty has already pointed out, we have time over lunch, time over tea breaks to discuss with the speakers and the paper presenters. More than that, a conference should also serve as a contact point, not just for that 2-day or 1-day event, but over a longer period of time. So I would request this, especially the scholars and the students assembled here, to continue to be in contact with the various speakers, the paper presenters, the discussants who are a part of our conference, not just this any other conference. So but one good thing that I noticed about this particular session, and I'm also thankful to the presenters, that we did not have to rush any of the speakers through their presentation. Maybe because one of our, in fact, the first speaker was not available. But then, as the chair, I'm rushing myself because sometimes the organizers put us in a very, very difficult spot. It is namaz time, Jummah time, and it is lunch time, and I cannot exceed the 1 p.m. slot. I think we've already exceeded by a minute or so. Thank you so much for being with us. Looking forward to meeting you again and again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Very briefly, thank you, chair of the session, and all the speakers and participants. We'll reassemble here at 2:30 in the same hall.